Dobar dan poštovani gledatelji, gledate Spike, emisiju televizije Student. Danas razgovaramo sa doktoricom Janet Harris, profesoricom sa Sveučilišta u Cardiffu, novinarkom, dokumentaristicom i bivšom ratnom izvjestiteljicom. Welcome to our studio. So, you are teaching journalism. How did you get there?
Well, I started at the BBC, right the way at the bottom from helping make teas. And then I got into documentaries and I became a documentary producer-director. I did quite a lot of work for BBC News and Current Affairs. I then became a freelancer and did a lot of stuff for the BBC again, and then did a PhD at Cardiff and stayed there, and now I'm teaching there.
You have done documentaries during the war in Bosnia and Iraq. What stories did you cover?
I worked on a series called Sarajevo Street Under Siege, where we had crews in Sarajevo during the siege in 1995, and they would send footage every night, satellite. It was before the days of internet, and I would sit in Television Centre in London and collate the material, get it translated, and it went out every night for 2 minutes. It was a very new way of reporting a war, because it told human stories, and some of the stories were heartbreaking. So we followed their lives over a period of time. Some of the people that we filmed got killed, but it was. I think they tried to copy this format again without that success. But I think it was a different way of telling a war, and it made me very interested in the whole region. And then I got into Iraq really because I'd been making films about soldiers, and they thought she knows about soldiers, so she can go to Iraq and make some more films about soldiers. So I went there first time in 2003 to make a film called Fighting the War. So this was a documentary series about what it was like to be a soldier in the British Army in the war. And then we were very tied to the British Army, and I was very interested in what else was going on. So then I did a series, made a program for Middle East Broadcasting in Iraq. I went back to Iraq in 2009 to do a whole series of news and things like that for independent organisations. And then the last film I made was again for the BBC in 2013 for the 10th anniversary of the invasion. So taking somebody whose son had been killed in Iraq to go back and to ask, the programme was called Did My Son Die in Vain? And for me the answer was yes. But so, I'm very interested in that region and in war.
You also wrote a book called Reporting War and Conflict. So how did the media coverage of war change over the years?
One of my points was that if you don't understand how war is fought, then it's difficult to cover, because the fighting of wars is changing quite a lot. From the Gulf War or the Iraq War, which was very much about traditional warfare with big armies. The Bosnian War was not that sort of war, but if you don't understand the sort of war that's being fought, it's quite difficult to cover it because especially now, for example, it's very much a media war. So a lot of the war is being fought in the media. And if you are writing for the media, you have to understand how the media is being used as a weapon, how to counter that, and that very much comes through to fake news. What are the strategies that both armies and governments are using to by the media to promote war or militarization or propaganda and things like that. I mean, there's always been propaganda, like there's always been fake news, but it's understanding it. And so if you understand it, then you can perhaps guard against it and know how to...
Because media shouldn't be so have a so important role like that in the war. I mean, on the side of the government.
Yeah,
it
but
should be just reporting what's happening.
It should be, but that's extremely difficult, even for the reporters, and that's another thing I looked at. If like, for example, I was a British person with the British Army in Iraq, how can you stop? As a reporter, you're supposed to be neutral.
How can you be subjective?
Objective, not subjective,
how
or
you
things
cannot
like that.
be subjective.
Sure,
Yeah,
and
so.
those difficulties are something else that I think a lot of journalists struggle with. And in fact, I went yesterday to the Museum of War Photography, which is very interesting because there they've got photographers from Croatia and from Serbia, and then some international journalists. And so you look at the photographs, and for me, I sort of recognised the names, so I thought I could spot which was who was Croatian and who was Serbian. But actually, in the end, it didn't matter. And so I think this is something that you can say afterwards, but it's a very important point when you're covering war. It's the use of media, and again, as I say, you can see this now in how the media is taking sides, or at least being used to promote different sides. And because people are not sure the sources of that, they take it as news. So, for example, if you look at the Ukraine war, that's been fascinating in how it's called hybrid war, how Russia has been using the techniques not just of the media, but corruption, of crime, not the more traditional forms of war, but also the media to start trying to persuade people to believe one thing and not the other by using many of the populist techniques that we've been seeing now very much in America and in Britain with Brexit, to try and promote that, to make people believe that one side is right and one thing is wrong.
What do you think? Why are people buying that populism?
Oof. Well, I think, I mean, I was reading earlier about a study in Britain where it's called the Cairncross Review, where they came up with the fact that a huge number of the population are not media literate, so they don't know what is fake and what isn't fake, and they're not sure who's telling the truth or who is telling the truth. So often they tend to, because they believe something, they tend to think this must be right because it's what I think anyway. And in many ways, that's previous studies have shown that what the media does is that it's called gatekeeping. It tells people not what to think, but what to think about. So if the media keeps coming up with stories about, immigrants and corruption in the parliament and corruption in the press, it becomes so much that people they think there must be something there. They're not persuaded, perhaps, but because all they hear is that information or all they read is that information, they then, and also if they're feeling, which has been happening a lot, they're feeling that the government is out of touch with them, that nobody is looking after them.
They're a bit alone.
They're alone, they're feeling victims. It becomes much more easy to believe in all these dreadful stories. So I think you can see across Europe and in the States, perhaps, that's why people are supporting populism. Because again, I think as journalists, it's too easy to say, they're poor and stupid. That's not the case. You have to understand what is leading to this. Why is it that people are doing this? And I think, and that's what I try and tell my students, that you have to understand that's the whole purpose of journalism, the why, as well as the who and the what.
How to re-establish that faith that people lose in journalism?
Well, I think that's another big question that all governments are facing up to. That in the more reporting about fake news, then that colours everybody's view about news in general, that it's all fake. And one of the dangers, I think, at the moment is that perhaps the government, by stepping in and saying they're setting up bodies which are going to say this is fake and this isn't fake, once you start imposing those, then you start saying, well, this is true and this isn't true, which is what journalists have always fought against. For example, Russia, that's what Russia's doing. They're setting up a government department that says this is fake and this isn't fake, which means that they tell their story and the other story, but like Trump, this is not, I don't agree with it, therefore it's fake. And so I think there are some dangers, even though perhaps the impulse to do it might be honourable, but it's a very slippery slope to dictating what is right and what is wrong, or what is perceived to be right or wrong or fake or true. And And that's where, you know, I think education becomes so important in trying to persuade people about just critical thinking. And that's something that I do. So you can look at an argument and you can say, hang on, there's problems here. That's what drives you to be a journalist, that you feel that there are some things that people should know about, and there are some wrongs that should be righted. I mean, it sounds a bit idealistic, but again, when with students, and I think on the whole, I found that they believe that too, very much. Perhaps later on that they become a bit more disillusioned. But again, you look at the users of fake news, and most of the studies have found that they're all old white men, like Trump. Okay, he's the epitome of people who use and believe fake news. It's the young who are actually thinking more and who have much more, perhaps because they're more media literate, but they are the ones who are saying, no, this is not right. And I think that's what's going to be very interesting.
That's a big relief also. So you're doing your job well.
Well, I don't know if it's me. I think it's probably the young doing it, and I just come in and say, yes, that's good.
Is this your first time in Croatia? Have you been here before?
Yes, I came, I've been here twice before, 2 years ago, to do workshops in investigative journalism, both times for a week. And then this time I came to work with Gong and Factograph to run some workshops in investigative journalism.
So what are you teaching Croatian students?
I did a bit to begin with on critical thinking, again because it's not all about the technology, it's about your thought processes. I'm quite, I think that's very important, that part of media literacy is literacy, full stop. So I did some of that, and then I've been working with the students in their projects. Obviously, because I'm not Croatian, I don't know the minutiae, the ins and outs of things. They've had mentors who can help them much more really than I can. I can really come as an outsider and say, well, perhaps this is how you might structure it. Have you thought about this? And again, always emphasising on the fact that you've got to find evidence before you go and talk to people. You must find, you know, if people are breaking the law, what people have said before. You must find out, you know, what they haven't done that they should have done. Where's that written down? Regulations, all of that sort of thing. And obviously these are often very difficult to find, which is why investigative journalism can take a long time.
So you are coming from Great Britain, which wants to leave the European Union. How much media affected the results of Brexit referendum?
In the Cairncross study, they discovered that in Britain, 73% of the population actually think that the papers are lying to them anyway. Which then, why did they vote? Because again, most of the coverage of the media of Brexit or before Brexit was very pro-Brexit. There have been studies on, I think in Switzerland I was reading a study where they were talking about what were the attitudes of the British press towards Remain or Leave. And they found even the BBC was very much on reported from the Leave side. When they reported it, actually coverage was not again, there wasn't much coverage. And one of the things they found, very interestingly enough, which comes back to what I was saying about war, is that many journalists didn't really understand Europe. And another thing about Britain is that British have the least understanding of how the EU works. And again, I don't know if you read, one of the biggest questions on the day before the poll, the Brexit, the referendum, was what is the EU? Yes, Google, that's what everybody was Googling. Because people didn't know.
People don't understand and don't know. So when you talk about Brexit, do you find it hard to explain to people? And how do you explain it?
I don't know. I mean, personally, I look at it with complete bemusement. You know, I'm obviously a Remainer. I don't agree with Brexit in any shape or form, but again, all I can say is that try and understand why this is happening. You know, you can't just say this is wrong or this is right. You have to, and again, that's why a good documentarian, a good documentary maker, tries to explain why. And I think that's our job. If you explain why, then you can perhaps try and prevent something like this happening again.
Thank you for your time. It was very interesting. Dragi gledatelji, gledali ste još jedne spike. Do idućeg puta. Bog!